afternoon. Certainly good to see all of you here. Those of you who are eating, please continue to do so. We're going to get started with our program. And I'm very happy to announce that the Tulane School of Social Work, along with the Empowering Change Taskforce, is doing this presentation on the Supreme Court's Affirmative Action Decision. We're going to have a conversation about that. We have an esteemed panel here. But first, I want to thank some folks for making this very possible. Obviously, our Dean, Patrick Gordnick. Thank you very much. Angelique Phillips. Very much, Angelique. You've done a lot of work in the last 2 weeks to help put this event on. And, you all know Arturo. Is responsible for providing us with this wonderful food that you all have been consuming. Thank you, Arturo. All right. I'm going to begin by introducing our panelists. I want to first start with Adrinda Kelly. Yes. And I want to start with her first because those of you know our panelists. But I want to read a little bit about Ms. Kelly's work. She's a native of New Orleans and a proud New Orleans public school graduate. Adrinda credits her incredible Black teachers for her resilience, drive, and unrelenting belief in the assets of Black education. Referred to as Drin lovingly. She's passionate about the building capacity of exceptional Black educators to provide a high quality education to our children while challenging structural relationships of inequality through narrative and systems change strategies. Prior to her nonprofit work, Drin also worked as an education editor in New York, where she was focused on developing college preparatory resources for underrepresented students. Immediately prior to BE NOLA, Drin was the National Managing Director of Staff Diversity, Equity, and Inclusiveness Strategies at Teach for America, and led several initiatives focused on strengthening staff and alumni communities of color. Drin has written on the intersection between race, history, and education for teachers and Writers magazine. Drin graduated with a BA in English from Harvard University and holds an MA in Humanities and Social Thought from New York University. In 2008, she was a Diversity Studies Fellow at the University of Cape Cod. She is an active member of the McDonough 35 Alumni Association and is a fall 2018 Bahara Next Gen Fellow. We're very, very pleased and happy to have Jen on our panel today. Thank you, Jen. Our next panelist does not really need an introduction. We all know her and love her, and we refer to her as Dr. Cece. enough needs to be said. Also on our panel, we have Dr. Deidre Hayes. The practice here, whom we all know and love as well. And no more needs to be said. And I'm told I'm a panelist also, so I'm Reggie Parquet. So I will find my seat and then we will begin panel discussion. I'm going to ask Dr. Cece to speak first and share with us her thoughts about the Supreme Court's decision and how that may impact students at multiple levels in our education system. Dr. Cece.
Thank you, Dr. Parquet, and thank you so much for everyone who's able to join us today. So I'll speak on this both personally and professionally, and I think they are intertwined, so I don't really know how to separate them from one another. But the decision, while shocking, is not a surprise. In particular, to the work that I do as a critical race theorist, the pushback on affirmative action was already in place in many states, right, and for many institutions. So it wasn't a surprise in the sense of we haven't seen this before. What I will say is that I think the challenge now is to connect with institutions who may have already been utilizing a different route to ensure that classrooms and thought, right, and communities are and continue to be diverse in a way that ensures that at all points policy and procedure, right, are still upheld, because I think that's also important to name as institutions of higher education. So one of the things that for me is really interesting is in my previous institutions, affirmative action was not utilized. In fact, it already had been years and years since it had been sort of denied, right? We weren't able to use it anymore. It's important to also know that there are specific ways that institutions can still ensure, right, that they are being mindful of how and where students are applying from, and also how we are seeing what students bring to the table. And so I named that in a lens of positivity, but also as a lens of being realistic, right? The lack of the utilization of affirmative action now can also impact the way that people are seen as able to perform to a high level, right? Or to a level of expectation when it comes to grades, when it comes to decision making. And I know we have a lot more to talk about, but I'm saying that because part of it is like, this is unsurprising, right? It's been in play for a while already based on the states that maybe we come from or the institutions that we've been a part of before. So it's not surprising in that sense. And institutions have still been able to function well, right? Have still been able to succeed. That doesn't mean that I'm saying I am okay with the decision. What I'm saying is we have to re-strategize and think about what that means for our populations. And also the other side, because I am always student-facing, right, student-centered, is at this point, it's important for me to support and protect students, our students here, right, students who are in the future and who've already come through our doors, to ensure that at no point do they feel like, and do you feel like, you do not deserve or do not belong to be in these spaces because your GPA does not meet the 4.0. Or I heard on a podcast this morning, a student had a 4.9 GPA. I didn't even know that existed, right? Because back in my day, it was, you stopped at a 4.0 and that was it. And so that's also something for me that is part of the challenge, is to fear that students from marginalized communities will feel like they do not deserve and are not worthy of being part of higher education because of the things that they feel like maybe they don't bring to the table. When in reality, there was never a table provided to bring to those things to in the first place. So I'll pause there. And I know we're gonna have some rich conversation after that, but thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cece. Thank you. As I mentioned in the introduction and in her bio, Ms. Kelly is a graduate of Harvard. And as you all well know, Harvard was one of the parties, a part of the Supreme Court's decision. So we're going to ask Ms. Kelly to share with us some of her experiences at Harvard and how you think this decision is going to play out, both at Harvard and in the larger society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question and this opportunity to share a little bit more about my story. As was mentioned, I'm a graduate of the illustrious McDonough 35 Senior High School. I just want to get that on the camera. And I'm going to come back to that point in a minute, but I want to be clear that my public school in New Orleans in 1998 equipped me with the tools and the confidence and the ability to matriculate to Harvard University. So I'm going to put a pin in that. I'm going to come back to that in a second. But to share a little bit more about my experience, I was one of 3 students from Louisiana to matriculate to Harvard in 1998. I was the only African American. And the prospect of a community of Black people on campus to be in community with, to be supported by, was absolutely a big factor in my decision to attend. I think at that time in 98, the statistic was 8% Black students on campus. When I got to Harvard, I quickly began to see and understand that 8% Black student population was far more nuanced than I thought. In reality, the majority of Black students on campus were first and second and perhaps third generation West Indian and African immigrants, the vast majority. And a much smaller minority of the Black population on campus identified as African American, right? So folks whose ancestors, have been in the United States for generations and whose ancestors very likely experienced, chattel-based slavery in the United States. Very much smaller proportion of the Black students on campus had that profile. Within that, it segments further. A large majority of the African American students on campus and Black students on campus more generally were from middle to higher income households or from validating networks, right? So programs like Prep for Prep, or I forget what the program was at Phillips Academy, but there was like a bridge year that folks would come through to get prepared for their Ivy League experience, so on and so forth. And so my key point is there were very, very, very few people on my campus who had my particular profile as an African American from the Deep South who attended a public school and from an economically disadvantaged background. So the reason I'm sharing that is because in my point of view, the use of race-conscious admissions at Harvard, and I'm sure I benefited from that. And to my institution's credit, I think the ability of the institution to have a more holistic sort of point of view on whether or not, the candidates that they were looking at would be a good fit for the institution and their goals around creating a diverse learning experience for everyone, rich learning experience for everyone. I think that holistic point of view benefited because I absolutely maximized the opportunities. Went to a public school, didn't have 12 AP courses to take advantage of, but I took advantage of the 5 that we had. I joined the clubs that were meaningful to me. So I had my leadership experience, I graduated salutatorian, I had the GPA. So in terms of what was available to me, I maximized it. And I think that point of view alongside the use of the race-conscious tool enabled me to be offered admission to the institution. So I appreciate that. And also, when I got there, it was very clear to me that even that tool is doing light work in terms of creating opportunity for folks in my African American from the Deep South, economically disadvantaged from a public school. And that's a bit of nuance in the conversation that I think gets missed. We talked a little bit earlier about, just the nuances of the case and how Asian American in my point of view, Asian American student experiences are being used as a wedge, right? In this whole conversation. And I, again, being on campus, could quickly see that neither is that a panacea, right? If you're talking about a student from Laos or Cambodia or the Philippines and a student from China and Japan and Korea, those are different experiences. And so there's a level of nuance in the conversation, even when you talk about race consciousness and the categories that are being used, that I think it's completely missed. I'm gonna watch my airtime, but I want to say one more thing about my experience. Being on campus there, and this is where I get to take it back to 35. Being on campus there, the first year was the hardest. And it wasn't the hardest necessarily because the academics were so tough that I was out of my element. It was tough, but that wasn't the place where I struggled to find my foot. The place where I struggled to find my footing was just navigating the social milieu, right? Being on a campus where 80% of the children or the young people are wealthy, being on a campus where there is an extreme sort of atmosphere of advantage, right? And being in the particular profile that I just described, right? There was actually very few of us. So the social aspects of being in that place were the most difficult for me, particularly in that first year. And I say that because if I did not have my 35 experience, if I did not have that experience essentially all through school, K through 12, actually pre-K through 12, my first teacher was Mama Adrinda Castle-Haley. My first teacher was Mama Adrinda Castle-Haley when she operated the learning workshop. And so I have been indoctrinated.
Could you tell some of our students Mama Castle?
So y'all know the street, right? It used to be Dryad Street.
Dryad Street.
Yeah.
Renamed for
an amazing woman educator, civil rights leader in our space. She is credited with founding the New Orleans chapter of
That's correct.
the Congress of Racial Equality. She was instrumental in helping to desegregate what is now the condos across the street. but it used to be Woolworth. And she helped desegregate the lunch counters there. A huge figure, right, in the story of civil rights in New Orleans. In her latter years, post-Brown, post-Civil Rights Act, she became really focused on education. And people who I know and love, who she mentored, a couple of people on my board, her son is on my board, they describe her as someone who was the queen of long-term strategy, right? And so I just gained so much, my spirit, is filled when I think about the privilege that I had to sit in that woman's school, learn my ABCs and my 1, 2, 3s in a school where the first messages I got were that you are Black, you are beautiful, you are beloved, you are part of a community that cares about you and is valuable, and that your education doesn't just involve like the teacher standing in front of you. Your community is an educator. I learned my ABCs from Habibullah Salim. I don't know if that name is familiar.
Yes.
But he used to come to the school, and he's a poet, and he would be tutored Muhammad Ali's children, did some work with Rosa Parks, but he taught us our alphabet phonetically, Abaca and Epicha. Anyway, I digress. But what I'm saying is that pretty much all of my K-12 experiences have enabled me to be immersed in beautiful Black institutional spaces. And so what I got from that, apart from very sound academic preparation, was my term is spirit capital, deep knowing that, I can do anything, right? I'm as smart as anyone in the room. You might walk in the room and not know a lot, but start with what you know to learn what you don't know. Start with where you're at to get where you want to go. See with your third eye. You're the best and the brightest. These are some of the mantras that were impressed upon me. And so, yeah, I walked on Harvard's campus and I was like, oh yeah, I'm an outsider for real. And yes, this is difficult and different. And yes, I feel my lack of advantage acutely. But also what welled up in me in those moments was all of that stuff that got poured into me from these Black educators, from these Black institutions, so that, yeah, I might, feel the thing, I could shake it off and I could try again and just keep pushing. And I just want to say, for me, having been immersed in those kinds of educational experiences, that was a key component to make me prepare for Harvard, above and beyond, the academic preparation.
Very, very nice. In the city of New Orleans, if you pose the question, what high school did you go to? What do they say? We're talking about. What school you went to? What school you went to?
It's high school, it's not college.
That's what you're talking about. Dr. Hayes is a native New Orleans. Yeah. She went to one of the most esteemed all-girls high schools in the city of New Orleans. And she's going to talk about that experience as well.
I think it's so interesting to hear the 35 story, because mine is probably exactly opposite. But but much like you, I started out believe it or not, I went to a little house school operated by a civil rights activist, Jane Wallace. Her name was Jane Wallace, and the name of the school was Jane Wallace School. And most of our classrooms were either, I remember one classroom being in a little garage, where she had like 3 or 4 pieces of property. Do you remember that school? It was across the street from Ricard. Yeah, and right back where the Muslims were the Magnolia, uptown New Orleans. Very middle school with, my 6th grade class had 6 people in it. So, but it was really weird, but very different. But it was like being homeschooled, like the original homeschool. And, we were on MLK's birthday, we listened to MLK speeches. We had to listen to Marian Anderson. So my formative years were in an all-Black school where I learned a lot of Black history. I lived in A.L. Davis was my 6th grade graduation speaker, So I that was my formative years. But my parents were a little older. I'm a little older, and I am post segregation, and so my parents were of the thought that it was the best thing for me to integrate, right? So they started at Jane Wallace, and from Jane Wallace to Our Lady of Lourdes, which was a little Catholic school, but mostly majority Black, also very protected environment. And from there, I went to St. Mary's Dominican High School. And Dominican High School is not country. And Lisa will tell you, it's not at the same time. It's the same. And so our school was really tough. It was hard. My parents felt like it was necessary for me to get that, for me to be out, for me not to be, what I want to do is to be a smart girl in class. We were the smartest girl in class. Everybody was the smartest girl in class. Because it's very competitive. Dominican only took 10% of Black students necessary to get the federal. So we all knew if there were 225 girls in my class, we took 25 Black kids. And of those 25 Black kids, 3 or 4 got put out by freshmen. Right? Yeah.
And I did.
It's the same sort. And so it was my freshman year was very difficult. It's horrible to just Sister Marian. She was really mean. And so I really was challenged. And my parents were of the notion that you will not pay for it. And you will not allow this to affect you. You have to just keep going. You have to study. You have to study hard. You have to maintain your position as the smartest girl in the school. That was the expectation. And I just so remember when I made that seat, and my mom was like so upset because she was tough. And I said, but Mom, I was always a social worker. I said, Mom, as long as I was making straight A's, you never say anything. You just, it was just, and she said, because you're expected to make A's, you're not expected to make C's. And so that's how I was raised, as having to be in this environment, be challenged and still do well. And because of that, I think I'm still very close to every kid in my high school. So very close to that, a real bond. And because of that, we were, I would say, socialized to be with kids. I remember telling my dad, I talked about the black table. So, black table that was right next to the jukebox. And I remember saying something about the black table. My dad said, I'm not paying for that school for you to interact just with black kids. You need to learn how to talk to white people. That was their goal for me, to be able to integrate, to be able to feel confident in the spaces. Same goals, different methods, right? And that was how it was, because they thought, because they had lived in segregated Jim Crow worlds. My daddy would tell me stories about having to cross the street. If a white man told you to cross the street, he had to cross the street. Because that's the way he lived. And so he wanted me to be different and to be confident enough to be in the same spaces and consider myself equal. And that's completely where the Tulane high school education came from. And I can say I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for life and friends that I get from that school. I'm grateful for the experience. I still support the school. But I support the school understanding that there's certain things about the school that we really and one of those things was, slaves were really like slaves were like family. They were really happy. And when slavery ended, they went to sea. That's what I was on. And so one of the things that I want to done is to give white people into Americans that need these skills change. It was around recognizing and existence. So that's my high school. And so it was really that yeah, I'm talking over and then school. And again, when you were recruited at that time, they recruited Tony was a 4.0 senior when I got and when I walked into Loyola, we knew every black person. We knew every black person. By the time I graduated, we did not know every black person. They had really increased the number of black students by that much during the time I was there. And so that was, that experience, Loyola's experience was local. Loyola's a Jesuit institution. It's touchy-feely. It gets touchy-feely. They can take care of you over there. And so they the school supported it, supported the environment. I nothing bigger than this, but Loyola was a good school. And so then when it was time for me to come to Tulane University as a master's level student, it was the same thing. We were, it was 100 students and it was 10 black people. And of those black people was one black male. And of course, once again, we were very close friends. I say that to say that we find ourselves as black folks matriculated to each other to take care of each other. And I think that's what we help all things. It's really supportive. We had a similar background, similar goals, and really wanting us to move forward in our careers, but also understand that, you know, and I have to say that when I came here, I point out the importance, because the importance is really I don't think I would be here if it were not for him understanding his life experience. So I didn't say it. But I really appreciate that. But when I came here and I talked to Black students and listened to the fact that Black students were saying the same thing that I experienced when I was explaining to this. And that was amazing to me. That really was. And I just couldn't believe it. But the good news is was that I remember talking to one student that said, "Look, you have to strategize. It needs to be strategy. Because this is how we made it through the schools. We strategize, we stuck together, we study together. You know, we had a way in which we outsmarted the masses, but basically outsmarted the masses to get done what we needed to get done." And the student said to me, it says, 2017, we should be doing that. We shouldn't have to be doing that. And I said, you know what, you're right. And I learned from that student, and I understood that that was a shame that students in 2017, 18, 19, and 20 experienced what I experienced in 1989. And so that's it. So what I say to that is that I understand that we still have work to do.
I think takeaways from those shared experiences is that school education should prepare us as students. People who are functioning at a high level at top tier universities. There's a question about that. That may be one of the areas that we're going to have to look at following this decision. See how we strengthen those early educational institutions. My sister also went to the Dominican High. She left the Dominican High. She went to that. She went to the sister school. That's a couple of years. She fell in love after she came back home. We graduated from Milton, right? Here at Tulane. Yeah. Her high school experience prepared her to function successfully at this top tier university. From New Orleans, I went to an all boys Catholic school called St. O. And you know, I mean,
We're not going to do this right now.
and we sent a lot of kids to Harvard. So, I mean, we were just like sending, like we had an open invitation to go to Harvard. These schools prepared us for that. I want you to speak back to CC about how this decision should impact what we do at the elementary and high school level to prepare students, regardless of their skin color, you know, to be functioning at a university system level there.
Absolutely. One of the things that I couldn't help but play in my head is this concept of this decision being colorblind, right? Or that this ideology that is being supported, whether that be by people in the media or institutions in general, but just saying this is a colorblind sort of ideology or mentality, that's a harmful mentality, right? So to think about something being colorblind, that doesn't mean it's not there. That means we are not looking at it, right? Or we're just pretending like it's not. In particular, if we think about something being colorblind, one of my wonderful mentors, Dr. James Anderson, retired professor and dean at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. I was lucky enough to be his teaching assistant way back when. But he taught me everything I know about how to navigate these conversations that look on the surface level as, very kind, very just in general. And he said, think about it like this. If we don't talk about what's happening with race and or racism in academia, right, in the K-12 system, it's like going to the doctor, paying the copay, right? Sometimes it's a lot more than others, and saying, hey, doc, I feel sick. And the doc says, well, we're just not going to talk about it. And it should go away. What kind of sense does that make? Or if you go to the doctor, pay the copay, or put in the effort to get there and say, I feel horrible. And then the doctor say, we're just not going to talk about it. It should go away. That's similar to when we're talking about there's an issue that we know historically has been embedded in the way that our kids, our kids of color, our communities have had access, and more than likely have not had access to equitable education or the ability to have that capacity to choose the education that they want to receive, that they want their children to receive. The other piece of this is it's almost like saying that there is something we know that is growing, right? Or something that is ailing a system that is cancerous, that is continuously growing, and we're just not going to talk about it. That just means that it's still going to be there. It's still going to grow and still take over eventually what we have been trying to work for. So this concept of also strategy, I really appreciate this concept of strategy. I feel like growing up, my grandma would tell me in Spanish, it's like you have to play chess when they're playing checkers, right? And she would always teach me that because we had to be so many steps ahead to ensure that we knew what education was going to look like, or if we knew that I was going to have to work 3 times harder to show that I was quote unquote good enough to be part of a program. I was part of all these free summer programs on purpose because mom was like, I don't know which one's going to get you in, but you're going to be part of all these free ones, right? So that way you could get to something. The other thing I will say about strategy is that it is so challenging for strategy to actually work because culture eats strategy for breakfast. Every single day. And if we don't change the culture of what's happening or change the culture of how we are perceived in school or how we understand education to actually be accessible for our students, for our communities, then we can sometimes on the block. This panel up here can constantly strategize, can teach you about how to strategize, right? When you go off into your professional roles, when you go out into the communities that you're from, we can try our hardest, but if we don't change how people are understanding or pretending to not look at what's happening, then we're just doing things for naught. So for me, I think that was one of the key challenges of what's happening now is this perception of if we just don't talk about it, it'll go away. Historically, there's this huge historical context that often gets left out of education, and it's how our students have or have not been able to access education or equitable education. Now, we talked about AP courses. I am not from New Orleans, the only one up here. I'm from Texas, so a little further ways. But I went to a private all-girls course. I went from K through my undergrad to private institutions. And I have to name that privilege. And that was something that my mother and grandmother pushed for. And my mom worked 3 jobs all the time. My grandmother worked 2 jobs all the time. Baked cakes for ladies at the church. So that way I could go to the school, the church school. It was called St. Cecilia's. My name is Cecilia. But because of that, that was just a sector that we always have to push. And so my high school was an all-girls Catholic. It was not the most expensive. It was the most expensive was the one we were trying to. You can get in there, you're going to college. You're going to get a free ride because you went to that school. When the universities see that school, they want it, especially if you're staying in Texas, you're going to end it no matter what. You can afford that one. So we went to the one right under it. It's called Providence High School. And there, they only had 2 AP courses. I didn't know that AP was even really a thing, but I took chemistry and English, and those are the ones that I took, and I love them. I get to school, to the university of my choice, University of Miami, and Arturo and I are alone there. Shout out to Go Canes. Who's the first time I met other people and they're like, oh yeah, I brought in 27 credits or 35 credits. When I find out there's like this whole booklet of all these AP courses that people are taking, and I thought to myself, oh, I didn't take those courses. Right? How did I miss that? And then I realized it was not because the school only had the capability to pay teachers, to come in and teach those courses, even as a private institution. So I think all those things add up. Again, this does not mean that where we came from, the teachers that loved on us, right? If we were lucky enough to go to a place that had teachers that actually loved us, that they didn't try their hardest, and that our parents, my grandmother and mother, didn't do their best. It is embedded in the system that the school, the only school that my family could afford, or go to public school, which had 0 AP courses at the time, the public school that I was slated for in my community, that would be where I would go. And then I would go up against students who had 7, 8. Some of them already had gone to community college because there was a program for them to go. And I'm not saying that it is bad for them. The challenge is that I didn't have that option. And I had options. And my family put me through those private schools. But to still see that being an issue for some of the students that I've worked with and mentor is that they do not have the options to even access some of those programs because one, the families have no idea. Where is that gap for families to even know that information exists? Right? Is there there used to be what's called pre-freshman engineering program. I don't know how everyone found this free program. She's got a lot of free programs. Not a lot of free stuff. But I didn't know if it wasn't for her, and she was a secretary at a place that had a lot of lawyers. So I feel like she ear hustled a lot. And I'm thankful for that. One of the ultimate hustlers I've ever met. But without that, then what? Because people will say, there are free programs though. Right? If you put your student in this, they can excel. And they don't have to worry about the fact that maybe now there is no affirmative action in schools. And we're not looking at race, but you can still excel X, Y, and Z. Well, without any information, how do we get there? Right? So just because something is available, you have to ask yourself the question, available for who? Mm-hmm. Right? And even though I put this little place, this is available to everybody, but only the people in the first room will be able to see it. And the people in the back, you can't come up here because you don't have access to it. Or if you take public transportation, you got to get here by the time this office closes. And so these are really important things to consider when we think about the challenges that are already in play. And so I don't want, one of my fears about the decision is that people will walk away saying, well, maybe it's not so bad because everybody gets an equal playing field, right? And I don't want anyone to not feel like they get an equal playing field. That's what I worry about. That people want everyone to be successful, right? The people who still believe in the good of others will feel like it's okay. I want everyone to have equal access. But equal is not what's happening. Because there are already things in place that are continuously impacting our students, the populations, the communities that we come from. So I want us to have the third eye open, right? To always be questioning, okay, that sounds a little too big to be true. But the fact that we say we're going to get these additional programs now, who's going to get the additional programs? Right? And so I want us to be careful and cautious, right? And if it looks like it seems too good to be true, it is too good to be true. The other thing I would say about the elementary, even secondary level is the ability to, again, going back to the resources, but just making sure that with these resources, that we aren't falling into the trap of being crabs in a bucket. Right? And that metaphor I'll break down quickly. We have a little bit of resources for those of us who identify as Black, Brown, right, BIPOC. And so they gave us these little resources. And now we're fighting with each other and saying, well, I'm thankful we don't have affirmative action anymore because I don't think they got to those resources in the bucket. So now if we take it off, I'm going to have more access to the resources in the bucket. Guess what? We're focusing on the resources in the bucket And we have all these resources outside that no one is affording us because they put us in the bucket. And so I'm also mindful of that because there's a lot of rhetoric out there already. There's a lot of podcasts that are talking to communities, specifically like Asian American communities, Asian communities, that are asking them, like, what did you think? I heard one this morning. My wonderful colleague Amanda sent it to me, and it was focused on a young woman who did not get into her first school, and felt like it was because of affirmative action. So her family, she said, celebrated with the comfort with the outcome, because they said, well, we're thankful because now my daughter, who identifies as Asian American, worked so hard, and now she can have equal access to everything that everybody else who's getting privileged inside for. That's a challenge. But I'm not mad at whoever that young woman was talking, because that's the rhetoric that has been sold to her. And so I want us to also be mindful that we are not against each other, we are with each other in this situation. And at the very elementary school level, sometimes it feels like these programs, this pre-K program, and it's to benefit students, to uplift them to maybe skip first grade or be more developed, to only get 10 million though. So we want to get 10 of it. So I don't know what you're gonna do, but your 10 friends next to you, one of you is gonna be out. That's challenging. Why is it just 10? Right? Because then it is continuing that dynamic of, well, it's a fight. We're fighting against each other. When in reality, there's so many other resources. They've just sort of, not been pretty to us. And so I don't think that answered your question very directly at all. But I wanted to make some of the challenges that and the concerns I have. It's especially because at the heart of it, the family that I came from only did what they knew to get me through. Right. And so if someone was telling them she has to sign up for all these things because there's only 5 who are going to be assigned, they pushed me. So I would have to be one of those 5 to be assigned a special program. It's not because they didn't want any of the other kids, but they were sold and told that we only had 5. So she better be one of those 5. If not, it's not going to look good for her. And so I want to name that our families, my family, did everything they could to push me through it to be successful. It's also challenging because there were so many other families who probably could have done and would have done the same had they had the opportunity to access that information. To say, oh, this program could help my kid out. And instead of 5 slots, we get more slots.
Yeah, I'm so grateful for your comments, Dr. Cece. I call you Dr. Cece. And particularly your comments about colorblindness and, your questioning and wondering about. And I immediately thought about, as an ED of BE NOLA, one of my main jobs is to get to money, find money to, continue to support in our work. And, part of my learning has been, patients have to get these rights. And so I'm offering that as an analogy because I feel there are 2 conflicts that are sort of rising to the top for me when I think about this SCOTUS decision. One is just this, and I'm going to connect it to your comment about colorblindness, this observation that we should and are and need to spend a lot of time talking about how this impacts people of marginalized identity, right? And the danger of creating exacerbating a situation where we're sort of fighting each other for a limited set of resources. Absolutely. And I am always trying to keep track for myself about what's still invisible or not being discussed as much. And for me, one of the most disheartening things to learn about my own mother as I was following to examine these conscious admissions was to learn the extent to which folks who are AMDC, athletes, legacies, children with faculty are privileged and advantaged in the same process where, ostensibly, and that's found, race conscious admissions are not they're not appropriate. It's not an appropriate level, right, to create a it is not an appropriate. So for me, I have been very frustrated by this idea that 5% of folks who applied fit the profile of legacy. Then admission at a level of 3%. But in general, the admissions rate is 3 to 5% for a typical applicant. And I mentioned that as an example and connected to your comment about compliance, because we need to make visible the advantage of certain profiles of students. And the example I'm giving, right, for students who tend to be associated with those processes, legacy, over the faculty, etc. And I related to my day-to-day work in New Orleans immediately when I think some of the access challenges that we see in our schools, higher education space. We have our school demographics are still very much so majority of women of color, 90%. Within that 90%, 59%. So right. And yet, in our highest quality schools, and nobody is saying that the only way to assess school quality is our shortcut, right? And so when you look at school grades of A schools, in a school system that has 10% white children, those A schools have 44% being comprised of white children. Again, we want quality education for everyone, but that disproportionality needs as much focus as experience and challenges that children who are in other less important institutions, but institutions that are not delivering that kind of need to focus there. Also, curious about what is happening in our enrollment practices, right? Whereby pathways to quality are cut. I just wanted to add that because one of the opportunities for me from my sure, take move the on ramps for folks like me, but we get to interrogate the jetpack that other folks, right, have had and will continue to have in this process. And I think that's a huge opportunity for higher education, and it's an opportunity for me to have
So when I heard today, I looked at the history of it, right? So I talked about the fact that my parents went to integrated school. A part of that is because when schools were integrated, so schools were integrated. There's a PBS special that speaks to the fact that Louisiana and specifically took a decimated budget of public schools. There's a documented and said back that these 7 public schools that were okay public schools, probably not the best public schools, but okay public schools, they stopped actually dealing with infrastructure dollars for these schools. So when the schools were crumbling, they started to crumble around the 60s. They did not have the same both that other people had. And so one of the things I find interesting that yes. Not saying he's not even his age, but there are a group of black folks who believe that segregation was not beneficial to black. I mean, that integration was not beneficial to black because of that. Because of the fact that money was taken out of the school system, and that the support was not allowed. I watching this 80s, I think, the 90s, said, so there were these issues about the fact that certain schools didn't speak on. At that time, they called them magnet schools, and only certain people could get into the magnet school. And it's the same as there. And some folks believe that people like who decided to sit there because they wanted the best of their kids, they sent it to these schools that seemed to be better schools, and at the same time close the eyes to what the schools actually does. And in post Katrina, we saw a similar thing. And so, like your school, which was a magnet school, like they got a magnet school, considered one of the top schools in the second shore, was abandoned.
I want to shift just for a minute. There have been many comments made about the SCOTUS decision around affirmative action. Some of those comments have been on really extreme ends of the team. One of the more, I think, interesting ones has to do with this, with this perspective that the Supreme Court decision really is going to impact a lot of Black and American students, because only a small percentage of them will be eligible to attend these top tier universities. Speak to that.
First, I gotta compel my.
Well, it would be smaller, but in reality, in fact, most of us, people will come.
I mean, I don't know how many months, but for me, the reverberations that are possible, right, coming out of this decision are the things that, you know, when we talk about folks who are sort of reflecting on the moment, those are some of the things that worry me the most. Like, what's up with the TBE? What's up with what's up with other programs that are specifically designed to those racial programs? We're talking about elite schools, but it's studying the conditions for folks to not ensure the kind of aspect of diversity on campus, right? That ensure the diverse course that help shape worldviews that are nuanced and broad and expansive. And that racial wealth gap and so that you're able to have more safe. And I just want to say out loud, I think it's important in all of our conversations that, it's not Harvard. The ice is not cold at Harvard. And these other institutions, I think there's so much to learn from HBCUs. Think about how your HBCU, right? Yes, ma'am. So much to learn. School is to grow children, HBCU students. I got students, but to grow students, I think HBCU students phenomenally outcomes, great graduation, income, on the fields, and whether institutional Exactly the time that so there are a lot of work with HBCUs that speak the whole choice. So if for a child to want to be on a Harvard campus or UNC, great, point of choice. But success by access to
Absolutely, and I want to uplift that and name that. For me, when we just talked about how HBCUs have been so beautifully providing that love and that holistic support to many students. Many of my friends went to Southern, so not very far away, and their experience that they share, I'm like, I wish, like, I wish it seemed so beautiful. I loved my experience. I'm thinking more about my graduate program was an even more shocking situation for me. But I think that because when I think about the question of why can't institutions holistically support and love on students, regardless of if they're labeled HBCU, Hispanic serving institution, tribal college, why not, right? That's a problem in itself that you can't say as an institution that is not a HBCU or Hispanic serving institution or tribal college to say, we don't do that here. Why not? Why don't we provide that support to every student because they chose to be at University of Miami, they chose to be at Chapel Hill, they chose to be at Southern, wherever they chose to be, we embrace that choice, right? And we support them holistically. And so I think for me that is a much more of a very deeply rooted question and conversation about the importance of centering that holistic support and dare I say love, right, for our students in a space. Because love in education has been seen as like a dirty word. Right? You don't put that there. That doesn't belong. Right? It's inappropriate. It's unprofessional. But at the heart of it, then what are we doing? Right? With our students from the very beginning when they're babies, right? When they are children. The other thing I want to talk about is that this one specific instance is not a standalone. Right? The SCOTUS decision is not a standalone. Please don't believe the hype. Right? If that's what we think it is. And if you have a loved one who also believes it's a singular situation, educate them a little bit that it is not by itself. Right? The question of it's connected. So now what happens to individuals to access different jobs, to access graduate programs, right? We think about ourselves here, right? As to when we're still trying, right? You can look around, we're trying really hard, but we are trying still. And so what happens when people before us aren't still trying as well? Right, that will impact the way that we think about how our student populations work in graduate programs, in professional programs. The other thing that's important to think about is the neighborhoods that we grow up in, right? There's this concept that comes to mind as redlining, right? And redlining, long story short, depending on the neighborhoods you lived in, that's the access to resources you had, right? The taxes that poured back into your education system. What now? Right? Because all of that is going to be impacted. And if that means if that gives people a pass because the SCOTUS decision, I'm concerned that it may have given people a pass to say the same. So just like we're not going to look at how race is impacting school access and admission, we're not going to look at how race impacts where people live. Really? That's a problem. Right. And I'm also my lens, of course, is Texas. I know that there are lots of different communities, right? There's different areas of regions that function pretty unique. However, the thing that is pretty consistent across the board, if you say redlining to communities of color, those who are from marginalized low-income communities or grew up there, we know what that means. Right? And so even though things are different in every state, that is very similar in terms of the experience. And so I think that's important to me because we don't drink a lot. What our communities look like. What about the safety? Clean water. Right? If anyone's from Michigan, I don't have to say much more, right? Mississippi. And so what does that mean? And then school, right? Because that also that is impacted. Right? Are we bringing in teachers, right? Quality teachers who care, know what they're talking about, and love what they're doing? How do you bring them into a school that can't pay as much as a school across the highway? I can't be mad at a teacher who wants $20,000 $5. right? Or go across the street and to stay in the community that needs us, because that's how, that is my concern. This, the elementary school that I went to, and the high school that I was going to, was on the other side of the highway. So the goal was, if you wanted to get anywhere, you had to go to school on that side of the highway. Because the highway wasn't there with my grandmother and mom who's parents. But it wasn't like it wasn't there, and then it was there. And it split how things looked. Right, so even just the split can mean which schools get access to more income to pay people who do a good job at educating our children, our communities to be prepared, or even our parents who want to go back to school. But the other side is that what happens over there? And it's just a highway. I could walk across it, but it's night and day, right? On one side.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify too that the term affirmative action, it opens the door, it doesn't keep you inside. You know, and she earned her wings. And so I just wanted to make sure that people are clear that just because you are benefit from affirmative action doesn't mean that that's what that's for. Because if I don't and no one's giving you something opportunity, you're not giving anything. So I think that you know, and the other thing I want to say schools and accessibility and is that, you know, one crisis in our school system with level of access to education. Us, we really need to look at systemic issues and we need to and like we do that class and social workers. That's the lens that we all systemic that our entire system. And we all talked about we have not we have housing, we have healthcare, we have policing, we have all of these systems that we need to look at. So whether that's possible, like that, that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. It's directly related to the healthcare. Think about it, nationally, Black represent 14%. Roughly 5% of all physicians. We go into the emergency room and we don't see people who look like us. We don't see people who understand cultural nuances. That is a real thing. Diagnosed. Here in Louisiana, our population, depending on who you ask, our population here in terms of our population, we go from 31 to 33%. But only 8% of our population is Black physicians. And think about how disparities can impact that in regards to that. It's a real issue. Decision may appear to restrict numbers. We have to be thinking about how do we increase them. But what is the benefit, quite frankly? One last question before we open it up to the audience. Where
So in terms of the work to get as involved as possible in supporting the magic that can potentially happen between the teacher and the child. Use the word crisis, absolutely. Multiple levels, the one that I'm talking about right now considers the fact that we have less than a third of our children in this that we have a meeting. This university is it's still it's 2000 when it comes to exam. And so we gotta get the actual and the biggest path to enrich the educational progress of the child is to enrich the dynamic that's happening with the child and his or her teacher. And so for us, every day at BE NOLA, we are obsessed about that. We are thinking about how can we, given all that we know about the potential impact of quality Black educators and Black children living out, we have to focus on how do we make sure that our education system are sustained. Particularly for Black women educators, and it's going to generate benefits for everyone. So I'll just offer that. There's a lot more to be said about just the structure of how we do school in New Orleans, but we have to, that to me is one of the principal crisis for us right now. Our children need to be able
To add to that, I'll say nurturing. Our kids need to be nurtured. Our children are experiencing things that sometimes in their homes. And so, schools need to be allowed to nurture children. Cece said, loving them. And I go back to this segregated high school, and some folks know what I'm talking about. It's a segregated, approved Negro high school. That would have been it's a approved Negro high school. But he talks about the school. He talks about, the general and judge and the Pratt and Dow chemicals and all of these people who came from approved Negro high school. So, we need to be able to put some of that nurture in school so that our kids know that they are capable.
As an educator, I would be remiss not to say, educate yourselves, right? If it's TikTok that's educating you, okay. You can do that, yes. And also, right, read up on what's coming out. Right? We have a lot of virtual access to things, especially being part of Tulane. We can access different readings, different journals, if we are part of Tulane. Continue to educate yourself and question everything. I think this as being, I'm looking at our wonderful students, but as students, I love that you are critical. Right? And I know that as educators, sometimes people are like, oh, you ask me questions. But that's the part, right? You're supposed to be doing that. And so critically analyze what is coming out. Again, if it's too good to be true, go somewhere else and find some more sources. And also thinking about making sure that you're checking in with yourself and that you're okay. Because this also, as a student, right, if you are a student right now, it might be a little scary to be like, well, what now? Right? I'm still a student. How does that impact me? How does it impact my friends? If you have siblings, how is it going to impact my siblings or my nieces and nephews, whatever the case may be? Right? Check in with yourself. I started off by saying that my concern also is that students of color will believe that they are not worthy of being in spaces. And so I want you to be mindful of that and check in with yourself. Right? The first time anyone ever told me that I was an affirmative action student was in my master's program. I was the only person of color who was accepted in the cohort of 30 for a master's program. And a peer told me, oh yeah, you're here because of affirmative action. What? I didn't even really know what that was at the point, at that time. Came from Texas. Everybody in my neighborhood was Black and brown. Went to the University of Miami. were from everywhere. Right? So nobody was really like focusing on you don't fit because I was always in a place where there was a lot of everyone. And then I get to my master's program and I was the only one. And so that hit took me a little while to figure out what do I do with it. I had the choice to believe them and be like, dang, I was here just because of my last name or where I'm from or how much my family made. But I talked to some of my friends, I was in the gossip choir. And so my friends in the gossip choir were like, so what? They're like, you got here and you're not going anywhere. So do what you came to do and don't worry about why they think about it. And that was all I needed. But I'm telling you this because I want you to also feel for yourself in that way. Right? If you feel yourself believing the messaging about how we got here or how you got here or how your friends got somewhere, talk to somebody who you know will remind you that that's not the case. Because it can be very challenging to dig yourself out of that mentality. Right? It's not just race, it can be something else. It's economic status, it can be identity, it can be lots of religion, lots of different reasons and ways that people will say, oh, you got here because you're the one person out. No, you're the person in. Right? And don't forget that you're in, do what you do, right? You take care of what you need to take care of. And if they want to believe it, that's fine. But you're going to take advantage of the opportunity that already belongs to you. Right? It wasn't something that was gifted to you. It belonged to you. And so that's what I will say, because when I think about my experience, there were some times where I wasn't sure. And if there wasn't the peers who already had been on campus for a little while, I'd be like, no. Don't believe that. It would have been hard for me to figure out what to do best. So I think that's what I want to leave everyone with. And even if we're not students right now, pass that on to students who you see starting to struggle with that. Even if it has nothing to do with the SCOTUS decision, just in general, because it is messaging that is embedded in higher education, unfortunately.
We don't want anyone in this space to leave this space thinking that SCOTUS decision is a fatal blow, or what we feel frustrated with the decision. Think about something that one of these men said hundreds of years ago. He said, education is the great equalizer of the conditions of men. Education is the great equalizer of the conditions of men. When I say men, I'm talking about men, women, and anything in between. If you with that, we're going to now open the floor to questions from the floor.
I do love what you guys pointed out, specifically about attending a magnet school, because I attended a magnet school in high school for 2 years, an arts magnet school, and it was the worst experience of my life. Like, quite literally, I didn't feel like I belonged. And like, my mom was like, you're just not finding yourself. And I was like, no, if you don't let me leave, I'm gonna purposely fail out of this school. And I purposely failed out to go to the public school in my house, and I had the best experience with people who were like me. Like, one of the librarian that was at the school, I still talk to her to this day. She was the reason. She was a Black woman, a Black educator, and she's the reason why I'm here today. And it's just so many more people. Like, I hear so many like Black students especially say they don't have somebody, because I didn't have anybody like that at BTW. All my teachers were white women who didn't really care about me, and so it's just like it's disheartening, like, to see like other students go through it, but like at the same time I'm like seeing, I guess, that I overcame it. I'm like, I don't want to put this. It's like, you're gonna make it out. Like, you're gonna make it out, and there are gonna be people that are rooting for you in your corner. Like this, like, yes, it sucks right now, it's the worst right now, but like once you get into a place where you're surrounded by people who love and actually want to care for you and nurture you, you're unstoppable. So yeah, that's just
as I'm listening, I was thinking about a lot of the insane commentary that was given. I'm Oklahoma and Choctaw, and growing up, we would get, like school supplies or whatever. And in college, a lot of it would be y'all are rich from the casinos and all this like insanity when, I'm looking around and understanding a poverty that hits most of the tribe, particularly some of the bigger tribes where we don't have these incentives or whatever. And so I think about that in relation to some of the silliness that the conversations about, oh, you're only here because of affirmative action. But I would encourage everyone to think about what came before. Why do we have that? Why do we get free school supplies? We didn't get much, but it was because these things were put in place because of all of the broken treaties. The side of the casinos were there. Were we rich? No. Do we even get payments? No. But there's, even down to like scholarship funds. Oh, you're going to school for free. No, we could apply for a $3,000 scholarship, like y'all could too. But it's the idea of investigate it. Think about why people are getting something or receiving something, and think about that the playing field has never been even. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even say that we're on the same playing field a whole lot. But in terms of, if you look at the historical faults, without, for lack of a better word, you put that behind it, you can kind of come to an understanding and say, hey, you know what, they're getting school supplies, cool. How can I help? Or, how can I be a better, steward of understanding to it instead of being critical? And I think that's particularly important right now, where we are in a little bit of a panic of how far reaching will this decision be? What will it impact? Will it impact the jobs? Will it impact whatever? We're thinking, kind of piggybacking on what Dr. Cece said, we don't want to get in a space where we're like, now everybody has a fair chance. It wasn't fair to begin with. And I think that we really need to examine that together, think about ways that we can, be on the same playing field. We're not even on the same, the playing field's on the same. It's like field A and field B. So we need to think about that as well. So that's what was going on.
This is probably going to sound crazy, but for me, I didn't really understand why those were so intimidated by affirmative action. I'm not a mathematician. Look at the sheer numbers. They say we make up less than 14% of all Americans in the United States. And then you look at the ones that are pursuing higher education. And I'm going to say, let's pretend at least 25% of us pursue higher education. So we're looking at a very minute number of individuals that are taking up these spaces. So why do you find this intimidating? I understand psychological and historical perspective of that, because we don't want you in the same places that we exist. I get that. But this one's your numbers. Like, okay, why is everyone up in arms around affirmative action? And then my second comment is around legacy applicants and legacy candidates. I don't want us to get distracted, because I think that's what this is becoming. Okay, we've taken away affirmative action, but let's take a peek at legacy candidates. We're gonna focus all our energy, and then we might do something around that, and then we can say, oh, see, everything is fine now. We don't have affirmative action, and we've kind of eliminated legacy candidates. So again, just putting out the atmosphere. I don't want us to get so caught up in looking at removing legacy candidates as the ultimate equalizer, because it's not. And not look at the long-term impacts of affirmative action. Like you're indicating, this is just setting a precedent. It's going to impact other parts of our lives, other people outside of the BIPOC community, whether they realize it or not, and it will. And so those are more common, and I would love to hear your thoughts about it. But again, for me, I don't want to get distracted. I think that's what's fun.
I thank you so much for your comment. I agree. I think it's like this slime of hand, like this magicians. Don't look over here. Like, well, this stuff over here, because it's true. So they take away or they critically analyze, right, how legacies are being invited, in and or donors. Let me tell you something. Some of the access for donors, but if you give enough money, I have a hard time believing, right, that you're gonna cut that off. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. And again, I'm not up there, I don't know how that works, but that's challenging for me to believe that people will say, you know what, if you've given billions of dollars to the school, your grandchild will not come here because they didn't make the grades. Not right. Will never happen, right? It's not gonna happen. And I'm not saying that, again, I'm not saying that I don't want, like, hopefully not those billions of dollars will help other people, right? We'll keep the cultural centers up, we'll keep the scholarships up, right? We need that in education. That's the only way I got through the scholarships. So I'm not saying that we gotta cut that off, but I want us to be mindful that I think this, like you said, it is a sleight of hand. But we aren't talking about that. Works here. That's okay. The place I worked at before, rarely did your child get in if it was there. Why? Because it's got discount. You ain't want your kid, you got discount. You just like somebody full price, why would they let your kid? Discount. So when I think about that, it's a sleight of hand, right? They're gonna look at it, but how many children of employees got in 100% no matter what? It depends on the institution. But I do want us to be mindful of that because they'll say, see, we looked at it, we made it better, and now everything's fine. But there'll be another door that was open on the back end, so and so I appreciate that because I think that's why I said, like, let's educate ourselves, ask the questions. Anthony, you have something.
To both of your points, like with the sleight of hand thing, I mean, kind of like what you were just saying at the very end, even if they do take away the legacy admissions, those people still have way more resources than we do. So they're still probably going to be able to get in somehow, some way. So they can take away the legacy stuff, but they still have more accessibility than minority communities do at the end of the day. So.
Just slowly, right? Where we're moving up in the country, that's where what is that to you're wondering about why I can explore right now an institution and needed to expand to negotiate something for my children as a preference in the admissions process. And in exchange, they would get some resources to expand and move their school and, children of color is now for a list of that. And so the question becomes, yes, it's the slate of competition and how how does that, engineer, some of the challenges that we're talking about. Yeah, I'm interested in learning from folks, legal scholars in this space, social justice activists, about what's the opportunity to find the right boxes, right? That still allow us to all of these offer more opportunities to ever diverse community, potentially and factually.
Unfortunately. I'll take it one more time. I want to give our panelists a real we want to thank you all as well. We have some groceries.